So good morning or good afternoon or wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to welcome David J.W. Bailey, entrepreneur, founder-friendly and business advisor. Welcome, David.
Hi, welcome, Karen. Nice to be here.
So, David, you have worked both in corporate and you're an entrepreneur and been successful in both. Can you please share with us how your entrepreneurial journey started?
I'd be happy to. I think entrepreneurialism is something that you are drawn to at an early age. So I think my first entrepreneurial business was actually caring for local park and common spaces, where I started a little group and got paid by the council when I was 14. There are people, and I think I'm one of them, that are just drawn to wanting to fix problems by forming organizations. And that's quite different from fixing problems on one's own or working for an organization. I went to university. I went and worked for a major international accounting firm where I was an intrapreneur, where I created businesses inside that firm. Those businesses, when I left them in 2000, were about £6 or £7 million of revenue, and they went on to be global $100 million plus service lines. So starting organizations has always been within me. And then I started a computer and video games company with some friends. And that was my first exposure to the true risk of being an entrepreneur.
Very interesting. So let's talk about startups and funding. So why do you think that in a multi-billion-dollar business of VC and angel investors that it is such a struggle in terms of finding funding?
I've heard this an awful lot from early stage founders. And I wonder if they have the right company to attract the funding. Part of what I spend a lot of my time doing is coaching younger, smaller businesses and their founders in how to create a business and then to decide whether that business should be funded by professional money, long-term patient capital. And if so, then structuring the business so that the money can invest in it. I would be very cautious, and I counsel against young business owners going out to raise a few £1 million of VC for their idea, which will, in their mind, change the world. Because that's genuinely not what venture capital is for. Venture capital is capital for existing ventures, that's profitable trading companies that are growing very fast already and where more money will make them grow faster. People target the wrong sort of money. That's their first problem. The second problem is when you're very early, angel money, not funny. It's never funny. Angel money is the first source. And those are individuals who've made a substantial amount of wealth from their own businesses normally, or from investing in other businesses. And they have the right blend of skills and outlook to help younger companies. I would say make your company fit the requirements of the investors if you want to take their money. Yeah. But first and foremost, make a company that does not need other people's money. If you can do that, you can take money on your terms, not on their terms. So that would be the first question I would ask is your company genuinely structured and behaving in such a way that people can invest in it? Are you ready to be invested in? The answer is generally no. Yeah. And I could give you an example, which is why it is so hard, of for every 1,000 companies formed in the United Kingdom last year, only one obtained finance from a VC or angel. Only one. All the rest either worked on their own capital, were privately invested, or were funded by another company. So it is very hard. Some companies will make 100 pitches over more than a year to find their money. Others will make just 10 pitches and be funded within 6 weeks. And it's really important to understand that that's not really random. That is entirely down to the quality of the proposition.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you think then women struggle to find funding more so than men? Because it is it seems to be a more male-dominated industry.
Yeah, I've seen both sides of this. I've worked with male and female founders. I'd say the first point is that female founders have, over the last 20 years, been reasonably rare. There just weren't very many female founders approaching VCs or angel investors for money. Certainly not female CEOs. I'm really pleased that that has changed, because I've done a lot of work with ultra-high net worth individuals and funds where we've been looking at what makes really great companies to invest in. And one of the factors is gender diversity on the board.
Yes.
So
it's very necessary.
It's absolutely necessary, and it leads to higher returns for the investor. So it's logical for them to seek out groups where there are where there's proper diversity on the board. I think there are many complicated factors underneath this. Some need to be fixed. Others are factors that we just have to understand.
Yeah.
And to look at two sides. There is one where female founders I've met, so this is an observation, not a statistical fact. Female founders I've met tend to form smaller, self-sustaining, profit-based, local businesses.
Yeah.
And male founders tend to have tended to form very ambitious, high-tech, global business ideas. And it is the second one that is easier for VCs to get their head around. The second part of that, and that can be changed. And that's just a matter of outlook and experience, and it may be a false perception on my part. But I believe it to be true from what I've currently seen. And the other side is that there is a club, and this needs to be fixed. And that club is the current generation of VC and angel money tend to be men in their 40s to 70s who made their money between 1970 and 1990 from more traditional scaling technology or industrial businesses, or who had a career in merchant banking.
Yeah.
And that is the group of people with roughly 50 million to £1 billion, and those are the people who are active in venture capital and so on.
Yeah.
They tend to be the people who have the positions today. I'm so pleased to see that changing, and I've seen 4 or 5 really good early to mid-stage VCs that have on their own boards proper diversity, gender representation, a genuinely gender agnostic view of businesses, and who seek out diversity in their investment portfolio. I guess there's a follow-on question from what you said, I'll guess, which is how can female founders looking for money make it easier on themselves? I would say grow a network amongst people who have money, grow a network, and work with a diverse board with a more ambitious and scalable proposition, and perhaps worry more about scale at the early stage than outright profitability. Because if you force yourself into profitability, you tend to back off from growth.
Yeah.
So balance those things, and I think founders can help themselves and buddy up, form a diverse board. And I've been very careful to say that there's no evidence that male-only boards or female-only boards or whatever have an advantage. All the evidence says it is a diverse board that has the advantage.
Yes. And we also have to learn to work together, because there just needs to be this whole thing of male versus female going on at present. So at the end of the day, we all have to work together. So it's like you say, it's best to have a diverse combination of people with a different skill set, which obviously brings value.
Absolutely right. I would be very cautious about describing it as a competition or A versus B. It leads to all sorts of there's a word for it called non-goal congruency, where people don't have the same objectives.
Yeah.
And it's very, very important that people get their objectives aligned.
So what would you, what are some of your biggest lessons and learnings that you have experienced, and what do you think is unique and different about you that adds value to both corporate and entrepreneurs?
Okay, so that's a double question. So let me take that in two parts, if I may. The first thing about biggest lessons and learnings, I would say that Rudyard Kipling was absolutely right, that you should treat success and failure both the same. They're both frauds. They both cause people to believe things about themselves and about the world that simply aren't true. Balance. And very few younger entrepreneurs genuinely have that balance. They can be frankly deluded about their own ability. Anybody that wants to start their own business really should go and look up what Dunning-Kruger syndrome is. On the other hand, let's not be down on success. Success is great. Success is wonderful, but failure can be an amazing thing as well.
Yeah.
What else would I say? Biggest lessons and learnings. Have a mission. That would be a really important learning. Have a mission to make something better for other people.
Yeah.
And don't chase the numbers. Chasing the numbers is a pastime for sociopaths. It's unhelpful to the individual. Most of those individuals will end up imploding with mental health or, in some cases, criminal issues surrounding them. Have a mission to make things better.
Yeah.
And do that. And don't necessarily spend all your time checking the scorecard for your financial success. Let me think of a third one. So a third one would be generalists are hugely valuable but massively undervalued. I've probably seen 300 or 400 businesses that I've worked with over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks their business is unique and special, and that they are the only people who can understand it, and that they should recruit and work with more and more people who know more and more about their special and unique subject. And it's just not true. 99% of all businesses are exactly the same. They have the same problems. They have the same solutions. And people run around in circles reinventing things that, if they just look next door, would find already solved.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no such thing as a truly unique idea. I mean, it's like you say, things recycled and rehashed, and people think that, oh my God, I'm the next whatever. And meantime, it's not really an original idea. It's just a spin-off of something that already originally existed.
Exactly right. I would love to come across a truly unique idea, but I could say with a high degree of confidence, it would be impossible to deliver. Because if something is genuinely, absolutely unique and new, then it will not have the ability to plug into the markets and behaviors and systems and platforms that already exist. Business is about innovation, not new creation. You find a better way to do a thing, do that really well, drive it forward. So generalists, and I would modestly count myself among those, people that have a wide, broad range of skills and experience, can really help early stage companies on the majority of their problems, and probably know the expert who can deal with the 1% of your business that does need that expert.
So
So those are three things. But you also asked about what's unique and different about me. Well, I would like to think not very much. I have a broad view of the world, lots of experience from technology, professional services, service industry, finance, banking, fraud, investigations, not committing, and working with a huge range of small to medium-sized companies. What adds value? One of my clients immodestly stated sheer intellectual horsepower. I don't believe that either, but I think it says something, which is I have the patience and the time to sit with founders and tackle really tough questions from a basis of evidence.
Yes.
And that, I hope, adds value to them.
No, that's amazing. So in saying that, what have been some of your biggest career highlights?
Biggest, that's an interesting word. I mean, the ones with the most financial or emotional impact, which ones would you prefer?
Well, I mean, I think financial, but also emotional, because I think they're both, you have to have, you can't just have one without the other, you know what I mean? So I think that it's both, but, I think also when you see, when you build a company and then you see the growth from a financial standpoint, and then you can really see what an impact, and then obviously that has an emotional effect on you as well. So I guess you could start off with.
Yeah, okay. So the financial one's pretty easy. The financial one is pretty easy.
Yeah.
I would go with drawing a business strategy on a napkin in a coffee shop in 2010.
Yes.
And then in 2013, filing a set of accounts with £82 million, it's $100 million of revenue.
Mm.
And we took that business strategy from the napkin to the real world, and delivered that business. That was a really, really, really big moment. I would say on the emotional side, helping a couple of tiny startups raise their first £500,000, just getting them started.
Yeah.
That's really a great, great, great thing to be able to do.
Mm.
And I would love to move forwards, helping more people do that. That's highly emotional. I think on the other side, in terms of deep, deep emotional impact, finding that that somebody one's working with is a criminal, and then having to deal with that through the legal system is extraordinarily painful, but absolutely essential. That has an enormous weight of emotional baggage. Unfortunately, it's happened to me twice, and I've both times ended up having to deal with the situation. I would say I get a lot of benefit in helping clients understand who they're dealing with. Customers, investors, their own staff. Unless you have I'll take a tiny step back. All good business is based on trust.
Yeah.
And we should always verify that trust.
Yeah. Well, you have to do your due diligence on people. That's just part of the reality.
Absolutely. And that's deep, not just superficial, not just asking a friend. It's going to the data. So those things have big emotional impact. Driving a business to $100 million, raising first money for a tiny startup, and dealing with reality. Sometimes it's really painful. Sometimes it's joyous. There we go.
So that leads me to the next question. Who have some of your greatest mentors been, and how important do you feel mentorship is?
I would suggest that anybody who is a director of a company or a founder of a company needs to have a mentor. Sometimes I go further and say everybody over 45 should have a mentor, and then I think everybody over 25 should have a mentor. Everybody should be able to refer to somebody they trust who isn't financially invested in them, has broad experience and shares their worldview to some extent, not 100%, who can challenge them and say, I'm not sure that's a good idea, or yes, of what I know of you, that would suit you, you would enjoy that, you will do well. So those are that. I would say mentorship is critical to the functioning of an agile, fluid, always learning, uncertain world. We should always check our thoughts and beliefs with somebody who genuinely can help us do that, not just somebody who will always say yes. Mentors often say no. So that's that. So in terms of my personal life, in chronological order, my chemistry and biology teachers, Mr. Beacon and Mr. Chanderman, they simply wouldn't take no for an answer. I was a stroppy, angry, uncertain child, and they saw something in me, and they challenged me. They challenged me by making me read books that were way off syllabus, that would help me understand what it meant to become an adult. They walked me through the process of finding out what I was good at. I wanted to draw pictures. I loved art and I loved technical drawing. And they saw in me a deeply curious scientist, and they lifted me up, and over the course of just 2 years placed me so I could apply for and succeed at getting into Oxford University to read a science. So I'm hugely thankful to both of them. Sadly, they're not around to hear me say it. Then a partner at Deloitte, David Pollock, who showed me that personal integrity is far more valuable than money. We spent dozens of hours together flying around the world talking about anything except work. And I owe that man a lot. And currently, when I have really tough challenges, I work with a Cambridge angel, Charles Cotton, who taught me how to learn from failures and how to find an anchor. Charles is hugely influential on my life, and we both drink far too much coffee. So I would say there's an important lesson for that. The right mentor might be the right mentor for a period of time or a particular problem. That's important to understand. It doesn't mean that you're, in a marriage for life. It means that for this period of time, you are the right two people. Okay, there we go.
Perfect. So that leads me to the next question. There is a lot of talk about or in and around leadership, or the lack of leadership. What is your definition of leadership, and why do you believe that the lack of leadership is such a current challenge, and what do you believe that we could do better as a collective?
Wow. It really is the problem of the age, and we could look at Trump and Erdogan, and we could look at Orban in Hungary, and we could look at Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk. We can look around to these traditional models of leadership and question as to why they don't seem to work. I have very strong views on leadership, some of which aren't shared by many people. But I would say there is no real evidence that traditional leadership, as most people know it or would describe it, has a sustainable positive difference to make. Leaders are mostly correlated with time. There are some fantastic studies showing that super high paid and publicly known CEOs actually only have one skill, and that skill is to spot businesses that have fallen backwards in performance, join them, and then leave before they fall down again. that they don't actually turn the business around. The business just returns to the mean. Regression to the mean is a thing. Businesses return to normal. And a lot of CEOs don't actually add to that. What we would see as leadership in the corporate world is often just extracting wealth for their personal benefit from the shareholders and customers. And I disagree with that very, very strongly.
Yeah.
I think traditional hero leadership is a totally outdated concept and massively overrated in most media.
Yeah.
It's ever so easy to say Elon Musk is a fabulous leader. Well, he might be, but 99% of the others aren't. And what they're good at is they're good at PR. They have superficial glib charm. They are willing to damage other people in order to take wealth for themselves. And they are good at avoiding blame for their own mistakes.
Yeah.
When we
analyze about accountability, right?
Yeah, most leaders aren't accountable for their own failures. We have a thing called asymmetric risk, where shareholders and the public take all the risk, and the CEO takes no financial risk. The CEO never, ever takes personal financial risk in the large corporate events. So taking back from that negative view, let's see if there's a positive public view. I think leadership can be a thing of the moment. I think it's wrong when we look at it as being an individual. That's just simplistic, and it makes for a good photo and a byline and Jane saved the world sort of headline. But leaders have to work in teams.
Yeah.
And leadership by group is always better than leadership by an individual.
Yeah.
But there may be a thing of the moment, and I would say sometimes crisis management needs an individual. Wartime government might need an individual. And charisma matters because we tend to support things we know about. We know about things that we've seen in media and social media. Charismatic people are attractive to journalists who want to write easy copy that will get lots of traction. And obviously, there are people that take advantage of that.
Yeah.
I think another tiny negative view is that the people who most want a strong leader tend to be the weak followers. This idea of the hero will save us. Well, I would say to them, why don't you save yourselves?
Yeah.
Why don't you work as a group and solve your problems? But there is a role for individual leadership. The trick for a business is to govern and manage that leadership and change it when it's appropriate, so the right person is in the right role at the right time. It's a really complicated area. There's been a lot of science, and the science all seems to be telling us that what we believe, as in the charismatic leader makes it all work wonderfully, simply isn't true. There is, over long periods of time, so let's say 25 years of somebody's entire career, almost nobody in the whole of history has ever always made a positive difference to something. So we should be much more open, we should be much more dynamic with the leadership, and we should be really careful about this idea of following our heroes, and much more willing to look at small groups, 5 to 7 people, diverse, blends of skills, blends of ages, blends of backgrounds to solve problems. And then when everything's working, slightly larger groups, maybe 12 people who work together to keep things stable and steady and iterate so that things are more efficient. And those be ready to swap between those two leadership styles and group styles to generate long-term success. Sorry, that's a really long answer, but it's a terribly important subject.
So that leads me to the next question. The subject of education and universities and all these institutes, as the power of social media and online has shifted and impacted all business, how relevant do you feel these institutes are, and what do you think needs to be done differently And do you believe that these facilities are adapting and changing quick enough?
Wow, lots of things. So let's take those in slices. So education, universities and institutions, yes, they're terribly, terribly important. They are the last bastion of independent fact. Has the power of social media and online shifted? Yes, social media and online news has shifted us away from a world of facts and evidence and long-form analysis into a world of emotional sound bites, lies, deception, and psychological warfare. On a completely non-business point of view, I think anybody that goes anywhere near social media marketing needs to have read Alexander Dugin's Theory of Reflexive Control or the Russian Handbook for Information Warfare, or perhaps some of the works from Dominic Cummings or Mr. Bannon. You need to understand that lying is a deliberate tactic of large groups at the minute.
Yeah.
So education, universities and institutes. So let's be clear. Established universities of global reputation, unimpeachable authority and trust will remain and must be protected as the basis on which we found our truth. Where we have institutions, we need to be extraordinarily careful that they are honest and that we understand who finances them and what their intentions are. Yeah. In the US, for instance, the Atlas network, I would say, is entirely toxic to the world of both business and civil discourse. And in the UK, pretty much anything out of 55 Tufton Street is not truthful, simply not truthful. There are organizations and institutions that are set up to lie, and they are very dangerous because they cozy up to businesses and they make weak leaders feel important.
Yeah.
That's very, very bad. And they also manipulate social media. So what needs to be done differently, and are they changing quickly enough? No, they're not changing quickly enough. Education needs to shift, in my personal view, immediately and radically.
Yes.
From the earliest age to university and after, to radically create fully agile, enabled, conscious thinking adults with a set of lifelong learning skills and rational tool sets. My hero in this space, because I do have one, would be Daniel Kahneman and his book, Thinking Fast and Slow. I believe that should be required reading at 14 and then every year thereafter through your adult life. It's really important to give ourselves the rational tool sets to understand when we are being lied to, misled or deceived for the benefit of somebody else. So education does not equip young adults with those tools. I would suggest universities should be careful about the numbers of subject experts they turn out.
Yeah.
Recognizing that we need to continue to research some really complicated and difficult areas of reality, whether that's science or arts or history.
Yeah.
But turn more of their output to the sorts of adults that can work on the immediate crises of our time, which are the democratic deficit. Western democracy is in peril. It is in a period of rapid and dynamic change, and the outcome is really uncertain. It may well not benefit either citizens or businesses.
Yeah.
I'd like to see universities and schools doing more to understand and address the climate emergency with direct action that will have a positive impact.
Yeah.
Working more on the future of work. How do we deal with AI and robots?
Yeah, and the tech space specifically.
The tech space but really needs to start talking to artists and politicians and experts in organizational theory and experts in the environment to understand where they fit.
Yeah.
We must, my personal belief is that we have chased narrow corridors leading us to some dangerous dead ends, that we could just walk back a little bit and find that it's all joined up, and we don't take a holistic view of, well, humanity at the biggest level, the planet. We don't look at the whole thing. And that's really bad. We could do. It's not even hard. That's the funny thing. It's actually not hard. I personally think universities should be more socially positive. Help people understand the impact of what they do on other humans and the whole breadth of humans: race, gender, ability and disability, mental ability, health status, age, location. Let's be socially positive. And lastly, let's get the economic models to really work in a sustainable way. And I would point to, forgotten her name, but the book is called Donut Economics. And I would probably make those 5 topics: democracy, climate, future of work, socially positive structures, and donut economics, a part of every university course, so that anybody studying anything has a framework to hang the rest of their life on. That's a bit radical, isn't it? It's probably, they're not going to make me minister for universities because of that. But somebody should do that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was fun.
So that also leads me into the social media aspect. So social media is great, to which has enabled us to do so much more in business. But there also seems to be many negatives. What do you feel it has helped, or how do you feel it has helped you, and what do you think we can do better?
Wow. Oh, so, I mean, I am sufficiently old to have been there when all of these things were created, from Friendster and Friends Reunited, through to Bebo, through to the beginnings of Facebook. I was there when Twitter was SMS only, and you had to type manual commands into your SMS to make tweets send. So I've watched it all grow very, very fast. Social media is a hugely positive force. It can spread vital information. It can spread modern thinking. It can connect lonely people. It can enable people to realize they're not alone and other people support them. It can motivate, in a very emotional way, change. And great successes there in terms of animal rights, in terms of climate, in terms of local business. Some really positive things. And it can enable people to enjoy their lives by being at the right events and turning up to family parties and so on. All of those things, super good, very, very useful. It can help creative artists, musicians, painters, craftspeople. It can give us a sense of history. It can fill us with a sense of wonder about our world by showing us amazing photos and videos of places we haven't personally been, in a way that television does really well, but does in a different and more absorbing way. But social media is there all the time on our mobile devices. However, and I was very lucky to be at the premiere of Carol Cadwalladr's Netflix movie, The Great Hack. It is a very dangerous thing because it was built with only positive feedback. So social media is designed off the back of a theory. If you go back to 1999, 2000, a thing called the Clue Train Manifesto, and a book called The Tipping Point, where people suddenly realize that if you only have positive feedback, everything gets better really fast. And we invented this phrase, which is probably run out by now, which is called viral spread. And I think we have reached peak plague, because there is no doubt that social media became a plague. It now spreads disease. It spreads illness. It spreads madness. It spreads hard right-wing authoritarians. It spreads neo-Nazis. It spreads Islamic terrorism.
And also mental health, because I think people are painting a rosy picture of life, and in reality, behind closed doors, it's not.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Everybody lies on social media. And worse, social media in the early 2000s lost a little battle I like to call the pseudonym war, where the world of social media said everybody should have a proper identity, real name, real email address, credit card. We should know who you are.
Mm.
And large groups, and some very sensible groups, said, no, we should allow pseudonyms because otherwise gay rights activists, journalists in oppressive regimes, fraudsters, whistleblowers, won't be able to work. They'll be killed because the bad people will know who they are.
Yeah.
So social media, and I believe the hindsight that actually the social media organizations always wanted pseudonyms. As soon as we get pseudonyms, we get fake accounts.
Yeah, of course.
And it was originally envisaged, and I think people thought that you would have to personally create an account. But of course, now you can just set up a line of code and it will create 1,000 accounts an hour.
Yeah.
So social media was massively subverted at that moment once it allowed non-human accounts or non-real name account, non-identified accounts.
Yeah.
That was really, really bad. Then it went wrong when it decided to become advertising funded. And advertising funding leads you, like a red top newspaper, into having to pander to the lowest common denominator and the largest possible number.
Yeah.
And because of that, it developed tools to enable itself to understand the psychology of its users. And once that was understood, some really deeply bad organizations immediately learned that they could manipulate millions of people immediately with lies through social media.
Yeah.
So we've come to a very dangerous place. But I would take, if I go back to the word viral, and I wrote papers back in 1998, 2000 on the subject, which is the good news about viral spread is that if you kill all of your hosts, you can't spread anymore. So what tends to happen is either the virus becomes less damaging or the host becomes more immune. And I think we're in the moment where we, the people of the world, are becoming immune. It's happening very quickly. You can see the change in social media.
Yeah.
Social media will be regulated now. It has made a terrible, terrible mistake and done real harm. And I specifically point to Facebook, but Twitter, WhatsApp, Snapchat, all share their blame. I'm not going to classify hideous pits like Gab or 4chan or 8chan as social media. They are something utterly vile and really bad for everybody.
Yeah.
But the social media that we know and understand, Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, Snapchat,
Instagram.
Instagram to a large extent, all need to be designed to be safe. I was going to use the phrase safety by design. They are
well,
not
I mean,
safe.
that's one of the things that Whitney Heard from Bumble, has taken her lessons from when she was working, with the people from Tinder. And I mean, all this business of unsolicited images and all of that. And I think that they're probably the first and only platform that I've seen that's actually been proactive in taking this in terms of state law and even going federal in terms of, prosecuting people for this kind of inappropriate behavior.
It's easy to look at those individuals' behaviors on those platforms, and I would say it's reprehensible, and the platforms themselves should understand that they need to put much more human effort into regulating traffic, and they're only going to be able to do that when they can identify their customers properly.
Yes.
And then I think we need to look at the larger actors. So in 2018, Grindr had millions of users' private data exposed. We've had Tinder being left vulnerable. We had Grindr selling HIV status information to third-party companies. I mean, that is really dangerous.
Yeah. Unacceptable, quite honestly.
It's absolutely unacceptable. I'm hoping for a future in which individuals own their data and on a case-by-case basis are paid when other people use it.
Yeah.
Data is as valuable as oil, but we are the oil and we are the ones being crushed and ground up and boiled to extract value from us, and it shouldn't be that way. We should be paid for our data. So I'd like to see a complete turnaround in that.
Sure.
If you really, really, really want to understand what goes on, and if you are a user of Tinder or Grindr or a dating app, write them a subject access request. And there's a case back in 2017 where an individual did that. They were sent 800 pages of data, complete psychological profiles, all their personal sexual and health data. And that doesn't include what could be deduced from their social data. So we know that Facebook is more accurate at predicting which way you will vote than you are, which is weird, eh? So Facebook will can tell you which way you will vote in the future, and it will guess better than you will today, statistically. So that's really scary. Secondly, Facebook has been repeatedly shown to be able to predict, for instance, whether somebody is homosexual, whether somebody is sick, or whether a woman is pregnant, faster than their friends will know. That's really dangerous. Okay? So perhaps social media could do better. Now, on the positive side, if we truly understood how it worked as a society, and we said, you know what, I'd like Facebook, I give Facebook permission to tell me and only me that my posts are becoming depressed. So it's showing symptoms that I'm becoming depressed. And it can recommend me a local therapist, or if my posts show that my carbon footprint is likely to be really high because I fly a lot, and it can find train journeys or ways for me to reduce my carbon footprint, or perhaps ways for me to plant trees to offset my carbon footprint. What if social media helped us be positive instead of be exploited? And there's nothing fundamentally wrong with social media. What is wrong is the way in which it is being used.
And that's only people to blame. I mean, that's not the platform, it's the people behind it.
Yes, I would say. I mean, I met Zuckerberg more than 12 years ago, met him again 10 years ago. I've had conversations with founders of social media organizations, large ones. I would say they tend not to be very empathic. They tend to think about how to make their product bigger, not how to make it safer. And they tend to have a very superficial view of how their products actually work.
For sure.
So perhaps we could change that. And I think it will only come from outside. They will not change it for themselves. Billions of dollars of personal wealth depends on them willfully ignoring the reality.
Absolutely. So that leads me to the next question. We are all living in a time where every second person is a coach or a mentor, and or has written a best-selling book on Amazon, which now seems to have reached a massively oversaturated market. How important do you believe it is to have a mentor or coach, which you obviously highlighted earlier, but what do you believe should be the criteria for this, for us to be able to sift through all the garbage?
Wow, it's really hard. It's really, really, really hard. Yes, I think, have we reached peak coaching? No, I think it has a long way to go yet. That's not gone yet. Coaching is really good. I've already said that I think mentoring is extraordinarily good.
But David, my point on this, just to interject, is that it's not, I don't say from a negative perspective having a coach or mentor, but there's so many people that are living in their grandmother's garages or the basement of their parents' home, and suddenly now they go to a seminar, they pay all this money, and next thing, you know, they're writing a bestseller, but they don't have the credentials to back up what their mouth says. They've never run a business, you know, so there does seem to be an oversaturation in terms of that. So how do we sift through all of this, and how do people access besides social media, how do people actually access to get mentorship from someone like yourself or other people that, have an interest or in terms of the profession and actually have the credentials to back up what their mouth says?
Okay. Got it. No, I think that's fine. I think we can tackle that then. So let's separate the two. Mentorship is a long-term, emotional and intellectual partnership, rather like having a psychological therapist. Not entirely, I hope, but rather like. Coaching is to achieve a specific objective. And it is not necessarily true that the best coach is somebody who has achieved that. So let me give a clear example. It is not necessarily true that if you wish to be an Olympic cyclist, that your best coach will be another Olympic cyclist. Your best coach might be a data scientist from a university that studies either engineering or biomechanics or muscle performance or psychology, or maybe a combination of all of those things. So let's look at the two. Mentorship is for long-term personal development and risk reduction. And coaching is to achieve a specific objective. So I want to run a marathon, find a coach. I want to grow this particular business in, I don't know, marketing technology to a size of £50 million. How do I do that? I want to improve the profitability of my company by 5%. I want to learn to speak Mandarin. Those are things where you find a coach. So those are the differences. Where you find coaches, it should be to help you achieve a result. Right. It is not necessarily true. It might be, but it is not a requirement that your coach has done something directly the same or parallel to the thing you are trying to achieve. But it often can be. It can be. It is terribly important that you should have a coach who has achieved that change with other people several times. And by several, I would say at least 3. So I would take due diligence and go and do some references on a coach and say to 3 people they've actually worked with and say, did Bob/Jane/Bernie actually help you personally do it? And then ask some searching deeper questions. How did they do it? How long did it take? Would you have done it without them? And so on. And really understand if it was the coach that made the difference, not other factors. The most dangerous sort of coach is the one that picks people who are already succeeding and just takes things off them. That's really dangerous. We've all seen 1 or 2 of those. But pick a coach who can help you achieve a specific objective, set them a time scale. So the first thing is understand whether they've done it multiple times. Second thing, set a specific timetable with a numerically measurable SMART, and that is capital SMART, as in the best way of writing a performance indicator or target, a SMART target, and reward them for helping you to achieve that. Don't just pay them by the hour. So if you do those things, you're most of the way to the right answer, and don't be afraid to change them if it is apparent that they are not helping. You don't owe your coach anything. Your coach is being paid to help you succeed. And I think that's the last part of this, is that mentorship relationships are generally not financial. It's very important that your mentor can tell you the absolute truth. Whereas your coach is being rewarded to help you succeed. And I've been very lucky in the past to meet world-class coaches at Formula One level, international business level, super high performance, feats of intellectual challenge, mountaineering, runners, cyclists in particular, rowers. So many where a really good coach makes an enormous difference, but it is a particular staging point that you want to get to, and then when they're done, they're done. They go and you carry on. There we go. Those things.
So that leads me to the two final points.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you like to be remembered for, and what kind of legacy would you like to leave? And what are your three key pieces of advice for entrepreneurs?
Okay, so my legacy. I'd like to leave a lot of trees.
Okay.
A lot of trees.
Yeah.
I don't particularly need to be remembered. I think generally my ego hasn't been particularly useful to or helpful to me. And I don't particularly need to be remembered. I would like, I think, integrity. If there was some sort of great scorecard tombstone on the cliff somewhere, I'd like it to just have personal integrity and honesty. Those things matter, really matter. Yeah. In terms of, but I'd love to leave trees everywhere, as many trees as I could possibly plant. That's what I would like to leave, because they'll go on for a very long time after me and do good. Yeah. So that would be great. 3 pieces of advice. Challenge your own ideas before you support them. That would be really important. Second one, work in the best possible team you can create. That's 5 to 7 people, properly diverse, with an ability to deliver. So that'd be my second piece of advice. My third piece of advice is prove it by doing it. Don't prove it through charisma or presentations or public relations. Sorry, public relations is great, right? But doing it is better. So those 3 things. Challenge your own idea before you support it. Support it by all means, but after you challenge it, work with a team. And the last one, my mind has slipped. The last one was prove it by doing it. Do those things. Those would be my 3 little things for entrepreneurs. The 4th thing would be, for goodness sake, remember your life and health are much more important than your business.
Yes.
Okay. That wraps the whole thing up. Because when I find young founders following the kind of struggle mentality and grinding themselves into ill health, mental illness, physical ill health, collapsing their personal relationships and burning out, that's really sad. And it's unnecessary. It is absolutely unnecessary. You do not need to do those things to succeed.
Yeah.
So that's 5 bits of advice. The last 2 are free, Karen.
Thank you. Well, thanks for joining and for sharing, and hopefully we can have you back in the future.
I appreciate it, and thank you for having me on, Karen. It's been a pleasure.
Perfect. Thank you.